Okay, everybody, welcome. Jeff Leiker is the professor of Industrial and Operations Engineering at the University of Michigan, a world-renowned author, and more importantly, a consultant. He does the work. There's so many times I've been in conversations where people assume Jeff is a professor. This is a good assumption, but he is much more than that. So Jeff Leiker, thank you very much for doing Chapter 4. Welcome today.
And also I'd like to thank Hedia for making my slides look nice. She went through them and took my kind of crude ideas of presentation, and the reason the presentation looks very professional is because of Hedia, so thank you. I'll be talking about Chapter 4, and this is the first chapter that really starts the lean leadership development model that Gary and Convis and I created, and it starts with self-development. Well, every company has values, whether they're explicitly stated or not. For decades, Toyota did not explicitly state the values when you joined the company, and for a long time it was predominantly a Japanese company. You learn the values through stories, through hearing about the founders, through hearing about Kiichiro Toyota and Sakichi Toyota, and some of the great leaders that had began the traditions that are today known as the Toyota Way. Fujio Cho, after spending about 10 years in America running the Toyota Georgetown, Kentucky plant, came to the conclusion that for internationalization, Toyota needed to make the values explicit, and he developed the Toyota Way 2001 model. There's a booklet and there's a course that all managers and executives have to go through at Toyota called the Toyota Way 2001. And what he wanted to do was to really capture that oral tradition, the stories, the habits, and the way that they wanted leaders to behave to be a Toyota leader into this house. And the two pillars are continuous improvement and respect for people. And then at the core are the foundation of 5 values. And what this represents to Toyota, and these are in the words of Fujio Cho, is an ideal, a standard, and a guiding beacon. This doesn't represent policies or practices to implement, but rather a way of life to aspire to. We put the foundational values at the center of the model, the true north values. And what we then said is that the starting point for every leader in Toyota is to commit to self-development. And I'm not sure where it came from exactly, but part of this long, almost century-long tradition within Toyota, starting from the self-made man of Sakichi Toyota, a carpenter's son who ended up inventing an automatic loom and creating a global company. The emphasis was always on you make yourself. You can get support, you can get coaching, you can get advice, you can have leaders who help inspire and motivate you. We can structure activities, we can structure an environment that supports self-learning, but we really have to select people from the beginning who are interested in learning, interested in improving themselves. And Gary Convis is one example of that, when there were many people who could have been hired to run Toyota's first effort to bring the Toyota production system to America at NUMMI, the joint venture with General Motors. The reason they finally selected Gary is they said that he was interested in learning. He had told them he wanted to lead Ford, where he was a fast rising executive, because he thought there was a better way of managing people and developing people. And he heard the Japanese were good at it and he wanted to learn it. And that was really what sold them on Gary, not his specific background. They wanted him to know about car making and they wanted him to have some leadership qualities, but many of the people they interviewed had those qualities. But Gary wanted to self-develop. And Specifically, the True North values start with accepting a challenge with a positive spirit to creatively try to reach the challenge, even though you don't know how. So you have to be able to accept, number one, I don't know how I'm going to get there. Number two, there's a lot of uncertainty. And number three, I'm going to use Kaizen. I'm going to systematically use trial and error to learn my way toward that challenge. There's also a very fundamental value placed on seeing the actual situation. In fact, I was just preparing a presentation and quoting Kiichiro Toyota, who talked about trying his father's idea for some of the final stages of the automatic loom, where the shuttle of thread would automatically get changed. And they started out with 30 models, and then they ended up testing 300 models. And what he said was that he kept on coming up with ideas as they were developing these 300 versions, and his father would try every single one of them. And he talked about how many of them were dumb ideas, and how many of the brilliant ideas turned out to be dumb ideas, and how many of the dumb ideas turned out to be good ideas. So this idea of trying things, of having a direction, but then trying things and testing and experimenting is very fundamental. And you do that at the Gemba. You do that by actually going and seeing, actually testing, actually talking to customers, watching them using your product. The credit for anything in Toyota that I've seen is always given to the team, and not the individual. So there's an understanding that it's always the team. On the other hand, you'll always see one person who has the responsibility. So the team is working on a project to design a new car, a very big team, but there's one chief engineer, and the chief engineer is responsible, and the chief engineer is still being developed by someone even more senior who's acting as a mentor. So the chief engineer is learning as they're teaching, and they're responsible. And then each individual is responsible for their area. So Toyota talks a lot about developing individuals when they talk about teamwork. And then finally, respect means that people are team members, their associates or team members, and that's very serious in Toyota. It means that you don't simply get kicked off the team because you have a bad day or because the company has a bad day. Great quote from Fujio Chio, who again was the first president of the Georgetown, Kentucky plant, was the driving force behind the Toyota Way 2001. And he said there are many things one doesn't understand. Therefore, we tell them, why don't you just go ahead and take some action, try something. You realize how little you know, and you face your own failures and redo it again. And the second trial, you realize another mistake, and you didn't like that so much, so you tried again. And through this constant improvement, or the improvement based on action, one can rise to the higher level of practice and knowledge. So this idea, which sounds very simple and innocent, why don't you just try something? It won't hurt. I'm not going to be mad if it doesn't work. I'm only going to be mad if you don't try. And that very basic idea is probably the biggest single barrier to many people around the world who are trying to learn lean. And that is the fear of failure, the fear of not knowing, the fear of other people realizing that you don't know how to achieve the goal, that you don't know that your idea is going to work. So we have to act as though all our ideas are going to work. There was the other night a State of the Union address by the president. There was a State of the Union address in Michigan by the governor. And I never heard either of them say, we don't know how we're going to get there. They both had to speak with a very high level of certainty. We know the answer. I know the answer. I'm a Democrat if only the Republicans would realize what the answer is. I know the answer, I'm a Republican if only the Democrats would realize. So we have to know, and we have a disease of a desire for certainty. And then Fujio Cho comes along very innocently. He's a very soft-spoken person and says, all we really need to do is to know the direction we're going, take on the challenge, and then run experiments, try things, fail, see what happens when we fail, and learn from that. And then we will succeed eventually, and we will, if we're very determined, we'll find our way to the goal. So a very simple idea, not a new idea, but actually very threatening to many people. So what are the attributes? If I asked you, what are the attributes of a lean leader, we would be able to create a list. One of them was, it would be that we want a lean leader in particular to go to the Gemba. And when they're there, we want them to learn by asking questions. What are you doing right now? What are you testing? Why? What are the facts? What are you learning from what you're testing? What's your next step? So we know what to do, but the question is, do we know how to get there? We know what we'd like a lean leader to look like. Do we know how to get a person from where they're at today to becoming increasingly every day a little bit better as a lean leader? And the Toyota managers are really trying to teach a scientific way of thinking. This is something embedded in the culture. Perhaps it's because they had a scientist, entrepreneur as a founder who was inventing things. But in any case, it's very clear that the core of the Toyota production system is the scientific method. And Toyota managers are trying to teach daily a means of improving, adapting, and innovating. Sometimes people say that Kaizen means a lot of little changes, thousands of suggestions that are very tiny. What if we need a big innovative change? But if you go back to Sakichi Toyota, what he was doing was innovating in a very fundamental way, creating something the world had never seen, a fully automatic loom. Kiichiro Toyota worked with him on that. He then, with his own hands and the hands of the team, they created their first car from scratch. They had to build their own car. They didn't want to copy someone else's. So innovating, learning by doing, but and learning scientifically is really the essence of the Toyota production system in the Toyota way. They want to teach a scientific mindset, and it can be applied to an infinite number of objectives. If you ask whether the Toyota way is about quality, the answer is yes. Is the Toyota way about inventory reduction? Yes. Is it about cost reduction? Absolutely. Is it about safety? No question. Is it about reducing lead time? Yeah, that's important too. So there's whatever your objective is, really the essence of the Toyota way is using Kaizen to meet a clearly defined challenge. There are tools then that we've seen from Toyota, and I think one of the reasons why these tools have become popular is because Toyota has been successful. There have been books written about lean management. There have been success stories. And there's a tendency to want to benchmark and be like those who are successful, a general tendency, a general human tendency. So one of the things that a successful company, Toyota, does is they use these one-page reports. They put a ton of information on a single piece of paper, and it was originally A3 size. Sometimes it's A4 size. So if Toyota has an A3 report and that leads to success, if we have an A3 report, that will lead to success. And we've learned a little bit about A3, that it's actually a method to develop leaders. What we perhaps haven't learned as well, and if you read John Shook's book, Managing to Learn, where he actually tells a story of a young engineer who's using A3 and being mentored very well by a very seasoned coach, what you learn is that the thinking and behavior patterns that are being taught are really in the mind of the seasoned coach, in the mind of the mentor. not in the A3 tool. The A3 is simply a format on a piece of paper. What the A3 tool can do is it can help the mentor to understand the thinking of the person and force them to crystallize their thoughts and write down a short summary of their thoughts. But those thoughts develop over time. So they call it an A3 story because the story is unfolding. It has a beginning, middle, and end. And the report simply is capturing at any point in time a snapshot of that unfolding story. Now, an A3 gets used in other organizations without the underlying thinking process of the mentor, without the mentor who's transferring that understanding of how to define the problem, how to set the challenge, what is the ideal state, what is the gap you're trying to shrink, what are you going to try to test your ideas, how are you going to know if you're successful or a failure. They're teaching a pattern, a way of thinking, a process of improvement. But if you don't have a mentor doing that, and you simply have somebody that says, fill out this report, I'm going to check the report, they look at it, have a few questions, you answer them, and then they say, good job. Maybe you can make the graphics a little more colorful. The A3 will fail as a tool. It will fail to develop leadership. So the question is, how can we make this process that's represented by this diagram habitual and institutionalized? And this process is working toward a challenge. Again, that's the first foundational value of the Toyota Way, and doing it systematically through the Kaizen process and pursuing it by breaking it down to successive concrete target conditions. So we have a vision, and the vision is way out there. Then we turn that into a 1 to 3 year challenge. Then we're going to set successive short-term target conditions. I want the process to look like this in order to get this result. And then we're going to iterate. We're going to try things until we reach the target condition. Then we'll set the next one and the next one and the next one. And over time, we'll meet the challenge. So if I'm given a challenge, and in the book we talk about a challenge Gary Convis was given to achieve a 60% reduction in North American total warranty cost for all vehicles in North America that are on the road that are being brought in for repair, 60%. That seems like an overwhelming challenge. But Gary was given 6 years, so he immediately broke it down and said, well, 60% sounds bad, but 10% a year is not so bad. And a little less than 2% a month is even better. And a fraction of a percent a week is even more realistic. So he immediately thought about this problem in terms of the method for problem solving that he had been learning for decades. And he pulled together a team of seasoned people, executives from each part of Toyota, who had been developed to be lean leaders, to think the same way. And then they started bringing on more junior people who they were coaching. And they tried many things. If you ask what, and they did achieve the goal of 10% a year, but how they did it was through thousands of small changes, small improvements, and some of them made a big difference, some of them made very little difference, but they learned and they learned and they learned, and they reached that challenge. They were comfortable with uncertainty. They were comfortable that they didn't know how to get to the solution. They were comfortable that they were going to have to put their heads down and try things. They weren't going to figure this out by benchmarking a company that had lower warranty costs and trying to copy what they were doing. They understood this big picture of going from the vision to the challenge, to understanding the current condition, to setting short-term target conditions. For example, I want to reduce warranty, and one of the problems is we're not getting good data on the root cause of problems from the dealership. So a target condition would be to get accurate data on parts that fail from the dealership. That's not a quantitative number of warranty problems. It's a process that it's a pattern of how we want to work. We want to work in a way so that good data on the reason for problems, reason for failures are coming to the right people. And we want, once we establish that pattern, then we'll begin to whittle away and solve the warranty problems one by one as we discover them. So this is what we want to teach, and we want leaders to self-develop positive habits. And what we know about developing any positive habit, the habit of playing an instrument well, the habit of cooking well, is that there's a whole set of skills required. And if you simply watch somebody who's good at it, you can admire them and you could be inspired, but you can't do anything. You personally can't do anything. What we need to do is we need to break down the skills into small elements that can be practiced. We need to practice them and get feedback from somebody who knows whether we're doing it right or not. And then through repetition, we develop subroutines, like a computer has subroutines. We develop these subroutines that become habitual, that become automatic, that we don't think about. We don't have to think about how to hold the violin or how to hold the bow or where the notes are. That's in our brains as a habit. And that, again, that only comes through repetition of the right things, not of the wrong things. And then we can also get some social reinforcement from the coach and the team that makes us want to keep on trying, even though it's frustrating, we're failing, we're struggling. And eventually we'll institutionalize these habits so we don't have to think about them. Just like you don't have to think about how you're going to put your shoes on in the morning. So we know how to do this, and we need to do a similar thing with leaders. If we know what good leadership looks like and what lean leadership looks like, that's the challenge, is to get a person to that place to behave in that way. And we know when we want somebody to behave in a certain way, to have a certain skill set, we know how to do it. So we now have to do it. We have to break down the skills. We have to have the coaching. We have to have the practice routines. And just like it doesn't help to describe how pros play guitar, beginners need structured practice routines. Now, when you're skilled, when you're very skilled, like you will hear some young guitarists who are really very talented and been practicing every day of their life for the last 10 to 15 years. And they may say they're inspired by Jimi Hendrix as a guitarist. And they just listen and listen and listen to Jimi Hendrix, and it gives them ideas for specific licks on the guitar. And they try those, and that improves their style. To get to that point, they had to go through those 10 to 15 years of learning the basics of how to get a good sound, how to play the guitar. They had to have a structured way of learning the guitar to a level at which they could now listen to a pro and get ideas, and then they can start to try to incorporate some of those ideas into their repertoire. So at that point, they've gone beyond the basics, and they're at a level where they can improvise, where they can learn very subtle things. So I've talked about Mike Rother's methods that he developed by intensely studying Toyota, but what he started seeing through Toyota and his practice was what I've just talked about, that leaders don't become good coaches of improvement simply by telling them that they need to be a good coach, or simply by showing them what a Toyota leader looks like, or bringing them to a Toyota plant, or seeing the pros in action. The leaders have to learn. And even worse than that, the leaders, like the situation Gary Condis faced, already have been learning for much of their life. So Gary had worked for Ford for 20 years. And he had learned particularly at that time, in the 70s and 80s, he had learned what would be considered within Toyota bad habits, disrespectful behavior. He had to be the thinker, and Toyota wanted him to get the people around him to think. So he had to unlearn his habits and relearn new ones, and he did it at the Gemba with a coach every day. And the improvement kata and coaching kata are designed to be used with a coach, and they provide a structured routine. And we've talked a bit about this already, but there are 4 steps to the improvement kata, which, if you look at them, look very close and very similar to a Toyota problem-solving process or many other problem-solving processes. And it starts with the direction. You might have learned about defining the problem. And what Mike is emphasizing is you have to really understand the direction. And the direction has to be in the form of a challenge, something that's a stretch. And there has to be a reason for it. You have to understand why. When you understand where you're going, then you have to understand where you're starting from. Just like any journey, it's great on a map to know where you want to get to when you get to Germany and you want to get to a small village, but it doesn't help if you don't know where you are. So you have to know where you are, and that means grasping the current condition. And you'll hear that a lot in Toyota, trying to understand the current condition. And understanding the current condition means that I want to know the facts. It's not enough just to look at statistics, which give you a summary or a big picture view or an indicator. You have to go and see yourself, go to the Gemba and see and understand the real facts of the situation. So now you're grounded, now you know where you are, you have a direction, but the direction is way out there. And you want to know, where do I make my first left or right turn? And the map isn't that detailed. It doesn't tell you that because this is uncharted territory. So you're going to have to kind of feel your way along. And the way you do that is by establishing your first target condition. I want to get half a mile. I want to get a mile. And the more experienced you are, the longer that first step can be. So it could be a 3-month target condition if you're very experienced. But if you're not very experienced, it's usually better to fail fast and often, which means set a 2-week is usually a recommendation, a 2-week target condition. Where do I expect to be in 2 weeks? And I'm going to commit to that. And then I'm going to identify the obstacles between me and that 2-week target condition. And it's a target condition. So it could be an outcome, like a reduction in quality defects, but it's better if it's a pattern. We want people to very easily be able to pick the right part and not pick the wrong part. And what is the target condition? How can you define it in a way that I can come and see and observe and tell whether you have, yes, achieved it or no, not achieved it? And then the way I'm going to move to that target condition is not going to necessarily be with one brilliant idea that has to be right, but rather with experiments, with plan, do, check, act. So I'm going to try things and test to see if I get closer to the target condition. If I only have 2 weeks, those experiments better be real simple and fast. If I have to order a piece of equipment that's going to take 2 months to get here and a month to install, by then there's over a dozen target conditions that I could have worked to try to achieve. So by definition, I'm going to rule out big changes that are going to require a lot of time. I'm going to start with small changes. Now remember, this is the learning process for beginners. And beginners doesn't necessarily mean you've never solved the problem before, but you don't have the habit and routine of following this process. You're not doing this automatically on a daily basis. When you're given an assignment, you don't automatically ask, what is the challenge? What is the current condition? Let's go and see. What's my first target condition? What's my first step? And how can I try some experiments to get there? You know, people often don't think that way. They immediately start thinking of solutions. So we're trying to break a habit by replacing it with a better set of habits. For developing these better set of habits, it helps to have simple problems, or relatively simple problems that are achievable. For example, you look at a repetitive process if you have one, instead of a completely non-repetitive process to begin with, to begin to develop the routines. One of the popular approaches to implementing Lean is the Kaizen event, the rapid improvement workshop called Many Things. And the idea is to make a breakthrough in a week and completely reorganize the place and achieve very big targets, results by the end of the week that you can report out proudly to senior management. And then we do a blitz someplace else, and then we do a blitz someplace else. Now, if I'm in one department and I'm a manager, and you come to me and say, your area has been selected next for the blitz, for the next blitz, and we're going to be working with you, and we're going to be defining a problem area, and we're going to be setting targets for improvement, and we're going to get the team set up and the room organized, and we're going to order the donuts and coffee, and then we're going to come for a week, and we're going to be fast and furious, 12 to 15 hours a day doing Kaizen, and you're going to learn Kaizen. Then what's happening is that for this period of time, I'm practicing, I'm learning very intensely a whole set of new skills. And this includes the skills of problem solving. Perhaps a good process is used during the week, or understanding the direction and the current condition and all that. But then I'm going to go back to business as usual. So what that will look like over time is that occasionally I will be in an event acting in a different way, learning Kaizen, and then the rest of the time I'm going to be doing my daily business. And the question is, what am I really learning as a pattern of behavior? Am I learning daily practice, or am I learning what is taught in the events, in the Kaizen events? And the answer is that what I'm really learning is business as usual. I'm learning that because that's what I'm doing most of the time. And your brain is not smart enough to separate out what you would like it to learn compared to what you train it to learn. So the brain's getting all these inputs, and it's getting a lot of practice, and neurons are firing, and you're getting connections between these neurons that are getting reinforced, and that is happening as you behave. So if I'm practicing every day, whatever I do, answer the phone, go to this meeting, run it, yell at somebody who made a mistake, run to the next fire, go to the next meeting to report to my boss. If that's my daily pattern, I'm training my brain to do all those things as well as possible. Then the event comes along, and it's disruptive, and it's different, and it's fun, and it's exciting. And now I'm going to say to myself by the end of the week, this is the way I want to behave. Systematically solving problems, trying new things. It's accelerating. It's fun. We're a team. By Friday, we had a team shirt, and we're celebrating together. The boss loved it. This is how I'm going to behave the rest of the time. You could say that to yourself all night. You can say it in the mirror in the morning as a mantra. But what your brain is learning is what you do on a daily basis, which is business as usual. And you'll never override those daily habits through occasional events. Okay, so in summary, we need leaders who are interested, who are motivated, who have a natural inclination to self-develop positive habits to lead improvement toward business challenges. At least that's what Toyota wants. That's what they want their leaders to do. And I would imagine that you also want that from your leaders. Now, if you don't, you should, because the world is a complex place and everybody knows that it's rapidly changing and we need to adapt. So we're constantly facing, as a company, challenges from the environment, challenges internally with things going wrong that we don't expect, challenges from people who aren't behaving the way we want to behave, or who are leaving and taking knowledge with them. So in this dynamic world we live in, we have to learn to adapt, and we have to learn to do that by having some way of reaching our goals, navigating through all these obstacles. Second, tools like Gemba walks and A3 reports alone will not create these positive habits that we want our leaders to have. It just doesn't work because they're undirected, because we usually don't have a good coach who's asking the right questions, who's leading us in the right way. And without the coach who's well trained, then these tools will not help. And if we do have a coach, it's often because we've hired a consultant or we've done a workshop, and it doesn't happen often enough. It's a concentrated, it's like trying to learn to ski by going for your 1 week vacation with a daily lesson. By the end of the week, you'll have progressed from Monday to Friday, but if you don't practice after that, a year later, you'll be almost back to where you were on Monday. We need effective coaching, and we need practice routines that we actually practice at least once a day. And that seems to just be a natural frequency whenever you're learning. What I know in music, because I take guitar lessons, you need to practice daily, and they have even prescriptions that if you want to be at a novice level so you can play a piece comfortably and not embarrass yourself, you should practice at least 1 hour a day. If you want to eventually be a virtuoso, you should practice 4 to 5 hours every single day. And there's a structure even to how that 4 to 5 hours should be set up. That's become kind of a well-known recipe. So daily is important. So what are we practicing every day with a coach that's giving us corrective feedback, that's moving us in the direction of this vision of lean leadership? And the improvement kata and coaching kata, the reason I became attracted to them when Mike exposed me to them was that they are actually doing what the lesson books and the structure that's used for teaching skills like sports and music and cooking already have. They have developed a body of knowledge for how to teach golf, for how to teach guitar, for how to teach violin. And this has been fine-tuned for hundreds of years. We don't have the same methodology for teaching that has been developed for developing an effective leader who can develop themselves while they're also learning how to develop others, how to be a teacher. And for example, if you want to be a music teacher, you have to be able to play the instrument. And any good music teacher is still learning the instrument themselves at a much higher level. So they're practicing and they have a teacher, and then they're teaching someone else. What we want is for managers to be learning from a teacher and to be teaching the people that report to them, who they're responsible for teaching. So that means you have to be learning how to improve, and you have to be teaching how to improve. You can substitute how to improve for how to adapt, how to be more effective. And you need to have a desire coming from inside to get better. You have to have a vision of where you're trying to go, and you have to have a desire to get better. And then you have to impart that to the people who work for you and inspire them and be a coach to them. They have to have a desire to learn. And the nice thing about improvement projects, and you would experience this in a Kaizen event, is that it's self-reinforcing. If you can sort of sometimes push somebody maybe who doesn't even want to go there into the Kaizen event, by Wednesday or Thursday, they're humming along and they're excited. And you ask them what they're working on, and they'll show you very proudly, and they're turned on. So actually, the process of improvement and keeping score against a target is inherently interesting and engaging. So it's really getting somebody there and getting them into the habit of trying something new every day and getting feedback. And again, that's what the improvement and coaching KATA do. Today I talked about the improvement process, learning to improve. And then next month I'll be talking about the coaching KATA, learning to coach. And learning to teach is somewhat different than learning to do it yourself. With that, I will take questions.
Okay, so for questions, what I'd like everybody to do is raise their hand. There is a little button below Jeff's video. Raise your hand if you want to be promoted as a panelist, and then you could take yourself off of mute, ask the question, and put yourself back on mute. Also, if you want a PDF of this presentation you see there, just email me. Here we go with questions, and I'm going to open it up to Brian's group first while I look for others that are interested in asking. Go ahead, Brian.
Anyone have any questions?
Hi, Dr. Leiker. I'm Dan Bateman from Pratt, and I had a question in rolling out Lean as you're learning and teaching this, and it's impacting a group of people that maybe aren't learning it deeply yet. You sometimes get the pushback that, hey, you're creating a lot of extra work or a lot of extra paperwork by tracking things. And when you see this gap here and then we put up countermeasures, people can feel attacked by that it's more of a, hey, you're saying that I didn't do my job, rather than, hey, we have an ideal state, we had a gap, we missed it, we're looking at how to fix it going forward. Any thoughts or advice on how to help with that?
The best way to help is to get them into the game. When you start out with a big picture, and one way of getting a challenge is to develop a future state map, a future state value stream map, and that gives you a picture of a challenge. Now, what that says is that we're going to, from raw material, we're getting something in the door, and we're putting out product, and it's going through a whole set of steps along its journey. Or we're getting requirements for the customer, and we're developing a piece of software, and it's going through a whole bunch of steps on its journey. On that journey to the customer, there are many different people and departments that touch that product or touch that information and transform it. And if you break down that future state, which you should do, into smaller bits, smaller chunks, and then you find who's responsible for that chunk. Well, this person is responsible for the receiving department. Let's now talk to that person. That person becomes a student, a learner who's learning the improvement process. And now that person has a certain number of people report to them for this product family. And maybe that's 8, 10, 15 people. So we need that supervisor or that department manager to engage their people. And it may be a department with 5 supervisors, but we're going to focus on 1 supervisor to begin with, because we want to pilot the idea and learn how a good way is before we start to teach it and spread it to others. So in other words, the big problem becomes a lot of smaller problems, and those smaller problems are within the purview of a smaller number of people who you want to engage. And you need to share with them the challenge. You need to share with them the vision, what we're trying to do for the customer, what we're trying to do for safety, for whatever the purpose is. And then you want to explain to them, you want to essentially be teaching them, maybe not in as rigorous a way, you want to essentially be teaching them the improvement kata. That is, you need to be able to at least explain to them that in order to reach this objective, we have to understand how we're currently doing. And I need your help in doing that. And then when we know where we are, and then we define our target, then we're going to need to come up with ideas for improvement. And I'm going to want your ideas for that as well. So you need to engage them in that whole process as opposed to coming to them and say, hey, here's a form for collecting data, please fill it out. And then they ask why, and you say, well, because your management says you have to. That's going to immediately shut people down. But if you approach them right and you get them engaged in this process of a game, really the characteristics of game is that you are trying to achieve some score, and you're keeping score and keeping track, and you're trying things and you're seeing how they impact the score. And we can easily get people engaged when they're playing the game. But if we're playing the game and they're simply pawns, then they're going to get turned off. Now, eventually you might then have a model in one area, say of the receiving department, that's working, and now you want to spread that to other areas. And you have one advantage, which is you can show them, they can see that it works better, they can talk to the people there, and who can explain, hey, this is actually easier, it's better, it's less frustrating, look at what we're accomplishing, look at the trend line. But when you spread it, to some degree, you have to repeat the problem-solving process. So that it's not necessarily spreading a best practice that everybody copies exactly, but ask the next groups to improve upon it. So if you do that, then we find that people get engaged. What we find is that people resist mainly abstract intellectual ideas. That is, if you tell them, fill out this form, you say, this is what we want to accomplish as efficiency, this is a better way. I'm going to explain to you why it's a better way. You give them all the facts, you give them the data and the explanations. People resist that. Their mind immediately says, oh, great, I'm going to fill out more forms, I'm going to do more paperwork. He thinks he knows how to do my job better than I do. So they resist intellectually being told things, but they don't resist once they're engaged in playing the game.
That's great. Thank you, Jeff. That's a good explanation. Did that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Johan, welcome from South Africa. Go ahead, Johan.
Thanks very much. It's really a great presentation. Very interestingly, we've had a couple of conversations. I'm in a very regulated or highly regulated environment where we have a project management office that govern the bank's projects, and obviously there's different methodologies, the traditional waterfall methodology, and then we've started looking at Agile as a methodology, and I find that one of the big stumbling blocks with Agile for a company that's been used to a waterfall methodology is exactly that they're not willing to learn by failing. So a lot of companies say they want to be learning organizations, but they don't want to practice the plan, do, check activities. They want to go from planning to death to implementing perfectly, which never happens, but it's a fallacy that they hold to. So any comments from your side on that, Jeff?
The idea behind this improvement kata is exactly to break down those barriers. But it does require a commitment that your senior executives may or may not be willing to make, especially at first. The commitment is that they're going to commit to a process, to a routine, to a pattern, to a way of approaching improvement that they're going to actually learn first, and then they're going to become teachers of. That may be completely sound like science fiction to you and sound impossible because they've already delegated to certain people that you'll be the agile implementers, and then they've turn their backs and they're walking the other way. So now you're stuck with senior management that doesn't really understand or support what it is that they're asking you to do. They want you to do Agile, get results. And they don't know what Agile is. They don't understand that Agile really is a way of thinking, a way of acting, a way of approaching development that's systematic, but involves a lot of small experiments. And again, the idea of fail often and quickly and learn from failure is fundamental to Agile, but they don't understand that. Now, if you are basically left alone because the senior managers aren't engaged and you're responsible for Agile, again, what's going to sell the people who do this on the idea that failure is acceptable is if they experience it. So if you use something like the improvement kata and you take not the whole company, but a small number of projects with a team, and with Agile, you usually break down the software into features, and then you're programming the features and you're getting very quick feedback from the customer, and you're learning about your failures very quickly. If you put people in a situation to do that, and the manager who's leading that group doesn't punish people for failing, and in fact lays out, this is the methodology we're using, and you get the feedback, so you can't hide. So in one company that's doing Agile in my town in Ann Arbor, Menlo Innovations, the customer comes every single week and tries the software you developed during that week. So you can't hide when you have the customer in front of you using what you did this week, and they're struggling and they're having problems, you're going to see it. So you're getting that feedback. Now, if the boss, after the customer leaves, starts to yell and scream or point fingers, then you would be foolish to accept failure as acceptable. It's obvious it's not acceptable. So now next week you have to be perfect so the customer doesn't, or maybe you need to talk to the customer and co-opt the customer to say nice things even though they don't like the software. So the boss has to role model the behavior, but it doesn't have to be everybody in the organization if you're doing this on a pilot basis. Now, what many companies do is they roll out Agile too broadly, too fast, and then they sort of sit back and watch what happens. They have all these people who have their old habits, and they have no practice routines and no feedback daily and not enough concentrated, focused practice effort to learn a new way of thinking, to experience failure. And the boss doesn't complain. In fact, the boss congratulates me because I got it right. I got the feedback, I used it, customer came in the second week, and this time I fixed those problems, and I'm going to get reinforced for that. So I have to experience that on a regular basis for some period of time. It's like Pavlov's dog that sees the steak and drools because, or excuse me, a bell rings when the steak comes, and he drools over the steak, and then you take away the steak, and the bell rings, and the dog still drools. You've created a habit through positive reinforcement, and the habit now is associated with a bell ringing, even if there's no steak. So you need to create habits, and those habits need to come from daily practice, reinforced by the manager. But again, not every manager, if the senior management are not involved, then you as a local manager need to do this with your people and reinforce them and make sure that you find a way to get small tasks and rapid feedback on those small tasks and let them know it's okay that it didn't work. We only lost a few hours. We only lost a week. Let's try again next week. So actually the Agile methodology, by breaking the whole big problem into small pieces, and if you get rapid feedback, it actually lends itself to the kind of practice routines that I'm talking about. If the manager behaves correctly as a coach, they have to be taught how to be a good coach of Agile. and usually there aren't enough good expert coaches to do this across 1,000 people all at once. Perhaps you can do it in a few departments with groups of 10 people, a few groups of 10 people. Then you could expand it because you've developed, among those 30 people, you've developed a few coaches. So you can expand it to a few other areas. Now, if management's not going to let you do that, they're going to say, we need to spread this by the end of the year to 1,000 programmers, and I expect these cost savings, then all you can do in your local area is you can try to use a good approach, the true agile approach. And if you use it effectively, you'll get better results than other people. And then they'll be coming around asking you what you did that was different. So you can actually do the right thing and be the right kind of coach on a local level often, as long as you're producing the results. And if you do a good job in the process, you'll get the results.
Johan, thank you for the question. Johan, did that answer it? And Jeff, that was great. Take yourself off mute. I'm going to look for other people while you do that.
Okay. Jeff, thanks very much for that feedback. George, thanks very much for taking that question. That's absolutely valuable. I think for me, the learning point is to not leave it to chance, but to my local team that I'm going to have responsibility for, to actively coach them to do Agile the right way, to implement the KATAs so that the work gets done, but also the learning happens and the cultural change. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, Jeff, can you hear me? I've got a question in chat. I'm going to read it off. What we are finding in our company is frustrating people at the Gemba. Most worker supervisors are very much negative about the change, even if it's good for them, and sometime they are excusing with question like, what we will take home by this improvement. So in other words, what's in it for me, I guess, what the results are. I don't understand the question completely, but that's the environment there. Any comments on that?
There's the old adage of how do you eat an elephant? And the answer is one bite at a time. So this sounds to me like a case of someone trying to eat the whole elephant. We've got a large group of people and we're trying to do lean, and we're sure that this is safer. We're sure that it makes the job easier. We're sure that we have profit sharing maybe and that they're going to benefit from. So we're sure that this is good for you. I know this is good for you. I don't understand why you just don't accept it. And when we go back to our childhood, we all had teachers, we had parents, we had principals, we had all these people who were trying to do things that were good for us. And we resisted all of them because they were being pushed on us. To me, that's the problem, is trying to make changes broadly where the changes are ideas and all the thinking are coming from the experts, are coming from management and being pushed onto the people. And the method that I've talked about is to engage the people. And when you engage a group of 10 people, you'll still have some dissenter, and you'll have a few people who are just on board immediately, who are just crazy about the idea, and they become quick adopters, and then you'll have people in between. And then the quick adopters, if they are opinion leaders, will start to influence the people in the middle, and then you'll have that holdout, and they'll finally come up with an idea, and they'll get implemented, and it will work. And then suddenly they'll become your biggest advocate. So there's a process that happens that we've seen over and over again of starting to turn people by, over time, interacting with them, engaging them, giving them responsibility. Sometimes you put the person who's most resistant in charge. There's a lot of ways to influence people, and that's what leadership is all about. So when, for example, you're in Toyota and you're sent into a supplier to learn the Toyota production system, and you're now leading an improvement project, part of what you're expected to do is to learn how to influence people. That's part of your assignment. And if you're struggling with that, then your mentor is going to ask, why do you think they're resisting? And you're going to say, if you say, well, because people naturally resist change, then you get a, that's not a good answer. Why specifically is that person resisting that change that you're trying to make? And now we're in a situation where we can start to try to understand the obstacles and even try to experiment. What's the next thing I can try with that person to see what happens? And we can use the improvement KATA method on the target condition of getting that person to support the change.
Okay, that's great. Bob, Bruce, Subu, and I'm looking for more people. But Bob, please take yourself off mute and go ahead. And there's a lot of questions in the Q&A, but I'm going to let people ask the questions personally. Bob, go ahead. Robert, there you go. I took you off mute.
Hi, good morning. I'm Robert, calling from Spain. Thank you very much for the presentation. And I would like to ask you one question, if you let me doing this question is, what is exactly the true value, the true north, in order to explain to another people to engage this meaning, please?
Okay, so the true north, it's a metaphor for example, the North Star is always in the same place. And from it, if you're on the high seas and you're a sailor in the old days, you could use it to guide yourself to know if you're on course or off course. So you need something stable out there that tells you if you're on course or off course. You need a direction. And the true north is way out there. So that's not enough. But at least it gives you a general direction. So you can have a true north for your company. What is your company credo? What is the vision of your company? What is the mission? What is the distinctive value proposition of the company? What does your company want to be? What are you aspiring to be? You can have a true north for an individual. What ideally would you be as a leader in this company culture that you're trying to create? What is the ideal for the company culture? You can talk about a true north even for a particular work process. When we talk about, say, agile and software programming, we might talk about true north as having a steady pace of work with immediate customer feedback, and we're constantly trying to create the perfect code that gives the customer what they want. And we're doing that in a smooth, steady way, getting constant corrective feedback. So you might have a true north for the process of developing software, or a true north for a person doing a manual job that might be no reaching is the ideal. Never being in an awkward position that might hurt your body. So zero defects. So these are all true north statements of the ideal that can give you a direction to move toward. But the true north will depend upon what the unit is, whether it's the company, the department, the workstation, the person, and it will depend on your particular objectives in your company.
Robert, did that answer the question? Yeah, very good. Okay, Bruce, you're up. Go ahead and ask the question, Bruce. Bruce, you're up.
Oh, hello. Good morning. How are you?
Okay.
I guess what I see in the company I'm currently with is a situation where we've got a continuous improvement team. It's experienced some pretty good successes with some projects, and they're able to show a reasonable ROI. However, the frustration for me is that executive management is perfectly willing to let those folks run lean on their own. They don't really see lean as a business system, have not implemented lean in office and transactional type business. So I feel like we're really kind of spinning our wheels with the overall process. It's hard for me to understand how leaders would let a situation like this go on, but I'm wondering if there's anybody has any experience with a situation like that, and maybe how to overcome it.
Well, the first question you asked of whether anybody's had a situation like that, and we still, according to my notes, we still have 89 people on the list of attendees, and my guess is that 89 people have had an experience like that, and I'm one, so that's 90 people, and George is 91. So the first question is, the answer to the first question is yes, we have all had that experience. When you say you're spinning your wheels, your company is going through a process, and the way the process is being approached is very typical when a company's starting out with lean and doesn't have senior leadership with the vision and with the experience, which is they see it as a program to delegate to the continuous improvement professionals, and they expect the continuous improvement professionals to get results. Now, if we go back to the early days, I'm a professor of industrial engineering, and our forefather was Frederick Taylor, and he created scientific management, and his vision was that you'd have an army of continuous improvement experts who are called industrial engineers, who are doing industrial engineering. They're improving processes and they're getting results for management. They're working at the behest of managers. And they're doing the thinking and everybody else is obeying. That was Frederick Taylor's vision. So we have, over the last 80 or 90 years, we've been trying to move beyond that to a new kind of management where we engage people's minds. And that requires, if you believe what I'm saying, that the basic requirement for having a company where people are improving things, people are responding to challenges in a positive way, it requires that you have a daily coach. Then that daily coach can't be the continuous improvement expert who you see for an intense period when they're working in your area and then they disappear. And maybe you see them at a company function once a quarter or once a year. So you can't, you have to have somebody there with you, and that's going to be your manager. So you have to evolve to that. That's in some way. Now, you aren't necessarily, you're not completely spinning your wheels if you are doing projects and you're getting results and management is seeing it, because there's still some learning going on. We're learning that these tools work in the hands of somebody who has some skill. This approach works. And if they look deeper, they'll find that the continuous improvement consultants or experts or whatever you call them, the coaches, the ones that are really good have a set of social skills in addition to the technical skills. And they're working with the supervisors and they're working with the managers. And if you're one of the people doing that, then you're now acting as a role model. And I have one friend working in an insurance company where their approach is the continuous improvement team that goes and does projects, but she personally is very good at engaging managers and teaching them. And they're having much better success than other parts of the insurance company. And then people are started over time. She's been doing this for 3 years. People over time are coming to her, and she occasionally gets an opportunity. For example, there's a new group president for one part of the insurance company who she did voluntarily. It was outside of her responsibility, but she voluntarily worked on a Kaizen activity in that president's group. And the president saw she was doing something different and she was engaging people. And the president said, "Could you teach me?" Asked, "Can you teach me?" So she's taken on mentoring this president on a voluntary basis. It's outside of her formal job responsibility. But this president is just eating it up. Now she's creating an advocate in the executive office. Now, this happened over a 3-year period. She could not have predicted when it would happen or how it would happen. All she knew is that she's got to do every day the best she can do and become the best role model she can become, and seize opportunities as they can come up. And over time, the opportunities are starting to come up. She's also risen in the organization. So she's actually leading a region in continuous improvement. So she's teaching then the people who were her when she started, who were at her level when she started. So anyway, the point is it's a process and you don't really know how it's going to go. And you may be spinning your wheels in the sense that you're not moving beyond where you are now. I'm not sure it matters that you're not doing it in the office yet. And if your senior leaders don't understand that managers need to lead this, then it's probably better not to start spreading a bad practice even further now into the offices. It's more important to get it right where you're starting, say in manufacturing. So you need to look for those opportunities you need to do your job every day in the right way, and then look for the opportunities to positively influence people above you to the point where you're interesting enough that they want to learn from you.
Excellent. Bruce, did that answer the question? I'll take you off mute. Oh, well, that was loud. Go ahead, take yourself off mute if you like, Bruce. And I got Basilio here.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the detail you went into.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay, I'm going to promote, actually anybody with their hand up. Go ahead, guys, raise your hand. I'm gonna look at Q&A. There's a few more questions here. Okay, are they coming? They are coming from failures in CI initiatives implementations. I don't get the question. Hi, I'm just engaging as a consultant with a company that is from continuous improvement initiatives such as TPM and others. What can I do to turn that mindset around and they can start believing in the CI system like lean again? So I don't know, TPM is very much a lean system, is it not, Jeff?
Oh yeah, I think, like I said, the goal at the beginning, I said that the data production system really can apply to any goal, any specific goal, and one target condition would be equipment running when it's supposed to run, equipment making good parts at the required speed when it's supposed to make those parts. And that's what TPM is all about. Sometimes it's called equipment wellness, or operational availability. But when I want a part, and I want this part, the machine should be ready and able to make the part. And to do that, to achieve that, requires continuous improvement. It requires continuous improvement on the machine itself. And machines, even though they're a little bit more predictable than people, there still is a lot of uncertainty about equipment. There's an art to understanding equipment and knowing what to listen for and knowing what to look for. And it could be smell, and it could be sight, and it could be cleaning a machine and discovering something in the process of cleaning it. So they will often say cleaning is inspecting of a machine. And the discipline of TPM, as it is taught, particularly in Japan, is really about continuous improvement. And when we talk about the advanced stages, which is autonomous maintenance, which means I am responsible for this piece of equipment. I'm the operator. I'm the team associate who's responsible for this part of the machine or this set of machines. And my job is to understand it enough that I can anticipate that it's having some problems, and then I can take countermeasures to try to solve the problem. And as I take countermeasures and see what happens to the machine, I clean the filter more frequently, I change the tool more frequently, I discover certain types of materials of tools are better than others. I learn a ton about this machine, and I know more about it than anybody, including the maintenance people. So then I call the maintenance people when it's something more complicated than I can handle. But in the meantime, I know a lot of the detail of this machine better than anybody. So that requires daily practice in diagnosing problems and responding to the problems. I have to feel a sense of responsibility. And you can use the improvement kata, for example, where your goal might be to reduce inventory and to reduce lead time and better serve the customer. In order to do that, we have to have high operational availability. And at some point, one of the challenges becomes 100%, or the ideal is 100% equipment availability. And it gets down to the operator level, and they're running experiments every day toward their target condition for maintaining the equipment. But again, you can do TPM from an expert point of view and simply tell people what to do and have the maintenance people go in and do it. Or the ideal of TPM is that you actually engage the people and create good habits every day of checking, inspecting, cleaning, replacing, responding to failures, and develop those routines. So it's very much like the improvement kata, or like, again, learning a fundamental skill.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Okay, one question I have, and then, I'll ask people to raise their hand if they have any more, and we'll wrap it up. You said Frederick Taylor is the father of operations engineering, so call it industrial engineering. Now, you are a professor of industrial and operations engineering.
Right.
Have you thought of changing that title, and do you promote at all the lean manufacturing methodology in your classes?
Well, I personally do. I'm the only person who does, who's a faculty member in my department. We have some adjuncts that I brought in who promote this. I am teaching a course on lean called Lean Thinking in Manufacturing and Services, and the students are in teams. They're doing projects, and they're learning the improvement kata, and they're learning the coaching kata. So I'm doing that, and whenever there's a management class, and all industrial engineering programs require management classes, the history is almost always told as Frederick Taylor was a smart guy with good intentions, but his ideas don't work well in today's more complex environment. We need more employee engagement. We need people to think. So that's kind of a standard part of the teaching within industrial engineering. At the same time, students are being taught technical methodology, some very advanced scheduling, optimization, and they're being taught to be the experts. And even my students, I'll have a group of students who I've been teaching for a semester, and then they do a summer internship. And my teaching assistant said when they were asked to work on the project, they were set up to be experts. We've got this problem. We want to improve output from this department without adding any people. That's your assignment. And a team from the University of Michigan students automatically started collecting data, and they started developing value stream apps, and they started to chart out the quality problems. And then they came and they recommended changes. And the changes didn't get implemented, and they got frustrated. And this is my teaching assistant telling the story after the summer was over, saying, and then halfway through the semester, we remembered something for your course, and we remembered about engaging employees. And we decided to change our approach. This is a true story. And we actually went to the supervisor, went to the operators, and we asked them for their ideas. And immediately they started to give us their ideas, and they were allowed the same ideas we were recommending. But we then started to work with them to implement their ideas. And then it was like the dam had burst, and we couldn't stop the flood of ideas and the implementation, and we ended up achieving most of the target by the end of the summer. So that's a story that shows that the person could hear intellectually from me and experience it, say, in one course, these ideas, about engaging people, about coaching people, but their basic programming has been to be the expert. And it's very hard to rewrite that programming. And that experience that they had was probably a better lesson and a more impactful lesson in that summer internship than anything they learned at the University of Michigan.
Well, I know how hard that would be because they're all engineers now, and they fall into a certain category in life as well. Okay, I'm going to promote everybody. Last question, and then we'll wrap it up. Thanks a lot, Jeff. This was great.
So why don't we wrap up now? And again, where we are is we started with general background about lean leadership and about some basic tools for the lean leader like visual management and standardized work and the problem-solving methodology, which can also be the improvement kata as a way to learn that methodology and that way of thinking. And now we're starting on the 4-step model, which is self-development. Then you grow to a point where you can begin to develop others. And then as you develop a critical mass, then you have some degree of autonomous improvement, Kaizen, going on. And then you're now in a supportive role to encourage and support that. And when you get enough people at enough levels of the organization who understand the basics of improvement and the basics of coaching improvement, then you have the skills for Hoshin-Kanri, or a process of starting to align those goals so that they add up to big numbers, into the 60% warranty reduction. But based on this model, we're arguing that you need to start with leaders self-developing. That's stage 1. And if we jump ahead to setting challenging objectives and then holding people accountable who are afraid to fail because they've been punished in the past, who don't have the routines, the skills to systematically approach those targets, then we're in a command and control environment where improvement will become usually not sustainable, erratic. We're eliminating things. We're using technologies of quick fix, and we're not truly improving the process and the culture. So we're starting on this 4-step journey of learning, and next month I'll talk about becoming a coach to develop others, and I expect more good questions. Thank you.
Okay, everybody take yourself off mute. Say thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Have a wonderful couple of weeks. We'll see you in a couple.
Thanks very much. Very informative.
Thank you.
That was great.
Thanks.
Thanks. We'll be looking forward to the next one.
Thank you. Okay, take care, everybody. Thanks, George.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was very inspiring.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff. Learned a lot.
I'm gonna shut it down right now. Thank you very much.
Take care.